A new slide presentation or something you have for us at this point?
It is, sir.
Okay. All right.
Should have been emailed.
It was emailed out to us?
Yeah, we emailed it probably about 15, 20 minutes ago.
Okay.
Okay, we're live now.
Jeff, do you have the presentation?
Mr. Schroer does. I don't have the latest one.
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't either.
Wanda, let me.
Yeah, we don't have that.
Go up to display settings up there. Well, we're up right there where it says presenter view, Tim. In that monitors box to the left of your mouse. Uncheck the presenter view.
Oh my God. So what's happening is I'm sending emails to.
Jeff, I don't see it.
Okay, on the tab at the top of the
I
PowerPoint,
send emails to mayor's office.
the far right,
That's what
there's
I'm
a
getting.
checkbox that says use presenter view.
Yeah.
Down right there.
When I expand this, that's all of y'all. Yeah. So I sent.
Across the top bar.
Oh, I'm talking to. What am I thinking?
Yeah, you may want to mute your mic.
You see what I'm talking about, Tim?
No, I don't.
Across the ribbon at the top under slideshow, you've already got slideshow, the tab.
Oh, I was looking at the wrong one. Sorry.
It's okay, right there. Uncheck that, then run it.
Gotcha. Still on the wrong screen.
You could stop your share and then start with the correct screen.
Okay.
There we go.
Is that right? Sorry.
That was right. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Sim,
Yes, sir.
you sent out something about 15 minutes ago. What prompted that change that we finna look at now?
The presentation was the same, sir. I just had Deputy Finance Director make a small change as far as the slide numbers.
Okay, so nothing been changed, just the slide number has been changed, but we're still looking at the same thing, right?
You're still looking at the exact same thing, correct?
Okay. Well, Administrator Sims, if nothing's been updated, are you saying we can take the previous presentation and use that?
No, Mayor. What I'm saying is that we now have a presentation available for you all today that reflects this work session. You're still looking at
Okay. All right. So I understand that. You had a previous slide presentation and now we got a new one. We still just don't have that. I've not gotten an email about it. We're ready to proceed in lieu of us getting that. If you could just have one to make sure she transmits that out to us, now would be a good time, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it was emailed. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Go ahead to the next slide. Welcome to our first budget work session for our proposed 2021 budget. Go ahead to the slide, please. Next slide. Tim, or, okay, thank you all. Today, I'm here to continue our discussion for our proposed 2021 budget. In our last meeting, we talked about our organization as well as the impact of COVID-19. And we had a proposed budget presented to you all that reflected where we were as far as our projected revenues as well as our projected expenditures. This slide reflects our total projected revenues, $164,200,000. Our total projected expenditures, $172,325,000, which reflects a deficit of $8,125,000. We provided a proposed solution, the use of the CARES funding from transit operation, which would eliminate the transfer from general fund of $3.8 million. We also recommended the use of fund balance of $4.3 million, which would provide us a balanced budget. From the discussion then, several of the commissioners indicated the amount of that fund balance should be looked upon as for seeing if we could do some additional things within the organization, and we decided to do that. So we have some options that we would like to present before you all, as well as some of the impact that these options would cause our organization. If you would go to the next slide, some suggested a 5% across the board cut. With a 5% across the board cut, while it sounds minimum, with our organization, it would have a drastic impact on our organization as a whole. As we know, most of our budgets consist of personnel, and if we did a 5% across the board cut, we would be reducing our workforce. So with the proposed 5% reduction, it would yield $7.2 million. However, if you go to the next slide, the impact to our organization. The impact to our organization, the top 10 departments, and it would impact all of our departments, but I want to highlight the top 10 departments, how it would impact. With our sheriffs, $2.9 million, recreation, $659,000, IT, $332,000, central services, $312,000, engineering, $282,000, RCCI, $263,000, the tax commissioners, $193,000, public defenders, $188,000, district attorney, $167,000, clerk of superior court, $149,000, tax assessors, $139,000. And I'm highlighting these departments because, again, with a 5% across the board reduction, it would have a devastating impact on our service delivery in our community. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I got a question.
Commissioner, let me ask you something. Do you mind, I know we say this every year, do you mind letting them get through just at least this first phase of the presentation so we get a broader understanding of what was proposed?
That's what I was trying to do, get an understanding, Mr. Mayor, but I got no problem waiting. I mean,
if you don't mind.
Well, I mean, you lose track of where you are when you get all of it at one time. This probably something should have been going on for quite some time. I got no problem. Go ahead, y'all, let's continue.
Okay. So we took upon ourselves to look at what a 2% across the board look like for our organization. If you go to the next slide, a 2% across the board would have a $2.9 million in total reduction. It still also would have a impact to our organization. Again, most of our budgets consist of personnel, so it still would impact a reduction in the workforce. We highlighted, again, the top 10 departments, the sheriff's office, $1.1 million, recreation, $263,000, IT, $132,000, central services, $125,000, engineering, $113,000, RCCI, $105,000, tax commissioner, $77,000, public defender, $75,000, DA's office, $66,000, clerk of superior court, $59,000, and tax assessors, $55,000. we want to highlight again to show what a 2% across the board reduction will look like. So we also had another option, and another option would be a strategic approach. Our finance director used the term last time, a surgical approach, and we looked at how would a strategic or a surgical approach look, and also in case if the use of fund balance of 4.3 million was not what the commissioners wanted to do, also to reinstate the stormwater pay in lieu. And we would like to show that option. Go to that slide, please. So with that particular slide, this slide here, if we did a strategic approach, we are looking at proposing, asking for consideration, still the use of fund balance, but instead of a $4.3 million, we're recommending a $2 million. We're also recommending to reinstate the stormwater payment in lieu, which is $1.3 million, as well as, again, the strategic approach would yield about $918,000. That would balance the budget. Also, the previous slides, and I need to mention, if we did a 2% across the board cut for our organization, we would also expect a 2% across the board for our other agencies as well. We would have to endure that cut, and we would expect the other agencies also to have to deal with it as well. So we have this option for balancing our budget. If you go to the previous slides that shows the 2% across the board for the other agencies, if you would go back, I'm sorry. Slide probably 6, 7. Yes, there we go. We looked at options of a 5% across the board for our outside agencies, as well as a 2%. And we know the 5% would be devastating to our organization. So we also know the 5% would also be devastating to our outside agencies. So we looked at the 2%. The next slides. Some of our agencies we have commitments to, which are contractual, which we're not able to reduce their funding. And this slide represents those: Central Savannah River, 878 Engineering, the DFACs, the West Augusta Soccer, our library, our CSRA Regional Commission. These are contractual agreements that we're not able to reduce the funding. And we're not recommending that. We just want to highlight that these are contractual agreements. The next slide. In the last presentation, we recognized there were 2 funds that were out of balance: the DUI court and the solicitors, 5% crime victims. Our recommendation now is to reduce the contingency from $600,000 and to use $55,000 to address those funds. DUI court is solicitor, which would have those funds in balance. The next slide. So the recommendation, if the commission does not want to use $4.3 million of fund balance, this is a combination of using still fund balance. And I like to emphasize, this is something that we don't take lightly, but fund balance is used for situations like this. It is an emergency. It is unprecedented times that we're experiencing, and we think it's appropriate. Also, the strategic reduction of about $918,000, we will identify those reductions throughout our organization, as well as the reinstatement of stormwater payment in lieu. This will yield a balanced budget for our organization. At this point, if there are questions.
All right, let's do it this way. I know there's going to be broad conversation. I'm going to go to the commissioner from the 9th, and then I'm going to weigh in, and then I'm going to go to the 8th, and the 6th. We'll go in that order. And again, the 9th, I'm going to weigh in, and then I've got every hand that I've seen all the way through the commissioner through the 10th. Okay. All right, Commissioner from the 9th, it's on you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was looking at the 5%, we were talking about it, and Central Services was right up there with some other departments, and I'm trying to figure out how do Central Service 5%, and I'm not agreeing to the 5%. I'm just trying to figure out how do we get those figures. We start off with the sheriff department. We have not done some things this year we should have done mid-year to see where we are. Now we had every year budget time, almost crunch time, and we're trying to figure out how to do this. There's money that we need to be included in everything in that department. When you talk about the sheriff department, the sheriff department's got funds that come through this government that it's supposed to be to help law enforcement. We don't tally it up. We don't keep it up with that. We don't know where that is. When you talk about the Central Services and what they do, that was a department just been created. That department looked like it was going to be affected as much as I'm gonna say the tax commission, if not more. I don't understand how we get there. How do we ever get to those points and not look at this stuff early on, which here we are now against the wall. Budget is supposed to be set up for spending of the next year of what we're going to do. Look like we cutting back. We're not doing those things that what the budgets will be doing. How do we get there, Jarvis? I guess is a better word.
Now, what's your question?
Okay, well, Commissioner, in regarding to the dollar amount that we reflected for all the departments, that reflects a 5% across the board for those departments' budgets. So those numbers is just the 5% across the board for those departments. As far as how did we get here, we all know that this has been a challenging year for our organization, and not just our organization, throughout. Others are experiencing the same things that we're experiencing right now. Budget shortfalls due to sales tax, due to the unprecedented effect of COVID. So that's where we are now. As far as the sheriff's office, other funding, the funding that I'm aware of is the funding here. I don't know if you're referring to something else. We can explore it to see if there's something else that you're asking about. But as far as the 5% across the board, we thought that would have a devastating impact on our organization and our community if that would be the decision you all wanted to go with.
Again, I understand, like you just stated, it's the whole community that's been devastated with this COVID-19. And I don't think the government ought to suffer more than anybody else suffers. I mean, we don't want to go into fund balance. We don't want to make no drastic decision, I say, on a lot of things, but we're all in this together. So if somebody got to suffer, then we all need to suffer. We got to do everything we can to make it as light as possible. So I just saw those numbers and I didn't understand those numbers when it comes to Central Services, and there was a couple of more. We kind of, went through this, but I want to ask that question about how we arrive at those numbers. I get what you just stated, so I'm gonna just let somebody else maybe chime in. Maybe I get my answer I want to get later on.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Marion Williams, Commissioner from the 9th. Administrator Sims and our finance team, I want to ask a series of questions, but I'll begin my comments with the following. One, thank you for your work on preparing and presenting to us the information from last week and now this week. I have a series of what I would like to think are strategic questions in that by state statute, we're required to have a balanced budget. When the city adopts a budget, it's supposed to be a balanced budget, but also at the end of the year, to the degree that we can, we should effectively end that year with a balanced budget. Last week, what was proposed to us was an unbalanced budget, which I found interesting. and that as we talk about 2021, much of the conversation was focused on how do we get to that place. So I'm going to ask these series of questions. Administrator Sims, I'll pose this question to you or to your finance director, and that is, to date, what is the city's rainy day reserve fund balance? What is that amount? Because that normally should have been part of our presentation.
The amount of unreserved general fund balance is approximately $33 million.
Next question. How many days of operations does that represent?
Between 85 and 90, depending on the level of the budget that would be adopted for 2021.
Okay. Why is that a factor of the budget that's adopted for 2021?
Because that's how the calculation is done. Your operating days is simply the cost to operate per day is simply your budget divided by 365 to get the cost of operating every day. So depending on the level of the budget that's adopted, that affects the end result of the equation.
All right, next question. What were our sales tax collections for July, August, and September?
I'm sorry, what
were our sales tax collections for July, August, and September?
Okay, unless we got September today, we have not yet received September. So I'll go back to August and let's see whether Tim or I can find those numbers the quickest. Do you want to return to that question in a minute and let me keep going and ask Tim to look up those specific numbers?
Whatever's most appropriate for you guys.
Okay.
Again, I'd like to have that information for July, August, and September.
Okay.
And if we can get that, that would be very, very helpful. I think that's important data for us as we're making decisions, which goes back to the heart of the question around what our operational days would be in light of where we are. My next question goes to slide 9, Administrator Sims. And I appreciate your thoughtfulness around option 3, and that one of the things that tends to be significantly bad, especially in moments like this, is for us to step into austerity cuts. Austerity cuts have the effect of worsening debt while also slowing any economic growth that we should be anticipating. We've been down that path across the state before. We've seen it happen. And every time there's an effort to have austerity cuts, which is why I believe you've pivoted away from the 5% and potentially from the 2% as well. And so I do applaud you for that. My question on slide 9 is really more of a statement, and this is twofold. One, you're talking about reinstating the pilot payments for stormwater, and then there's also a strategic reduction of which I would encourage the commission to reject, because I think we can accomplish this in a different manner. But please speak to the issue of reinstating the pilot payment and the strategic reductions, which I think we should soundly reject. Speak to that, sir.
Mayor, with the reinstatement of stormwater payment in lieu, while we know that this would provide additional projects, we are experiencing a time that we probably never would have imagined. And we just think that it might not be appropriate to implement in 2021. We're
Right.
not saying or suggesting not to do this. We're only asking if that could be considered by the commission to reinstate at a later time, or if you would like, the second slide that I presented, which provided a balanced budget, which we do know is required by law, of the $4.3 million, if that's the will of the commission, the use of $4.3 million.
Okay. And all right, I'm going to pause there. We'll come back. I'm going to now the commissioner from the 8th.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to piggyback on your question about the stormwater in lieu of taking out from our fund balance. The stormwater fees that you're talking about, is this the specific stormwater fees that you're wanting to take from? Jarvis?
We had a discussion about the indirect costs or the additional costs as far as with some of the stormwater. And it was suggested that the amount of the $1.3 million had an impact on maximizing the use of the projects. And it was suggested to possibly not use that amount, and we could yield more projects being used from the stormwater. We're only recommending or asking for consideration if we're going to not use the $4.3 million of fund balance, which in this case, fund balance is used for emergencies, extraordinary circumstances, which we are experiencing now. If the will of the commission is not to use that amount, we are asking for consideration of the 1.3 million stormwater funding be reinstated for the general fund.
So did you answer the question about whether that was stormwater fees you're wanting to take from?
I think I hope I did answer your question, Commissioner. I said about
yes or no? Just because
yes,
honestly,
to me, yes.
Okay, all right. Because this is a specific fee set for a specific program, and I think that in regards to our constituents, I think that would be a slap in their face to take from a fund that already has lots of questionable uses, and then to put it towards our general fund. To try to fix our budget shortfall. I just think that is completely the wrong way to go with this. You're talking about taking 1.3 out of something that brings in 13 million a year. So you're basically taking out 10 or 11% already. That's just, I don't know. I don't think that's the appropriate way. And, last week we also talked about ways to make surgical cuts into our budget as well. Have y'all looked at that?
Yes, Commissioner, that's option 3.
I thought option 3 had you taken from the stormwater balance.
I'm sorry?
Option 3 had you taking the stormwater fees, I believe.
Option three.
I mean,
had a
it's hard to
combination.
tell because you didn't send out your presentation before the meeting either, so don't really have anything here to look at. I mean, if you want to put it back up on the screen and we can talk about it as we discuss this, that would be helpful. But once again, we're having a workshop on the internet with nothing in front of us to look at. I mean, you did the presentation, but we don't have the presentation where we were able to print it out or have it in our hands to look at as we discuss this either. That's we've had this discussion numerous times with a lot of the departments about how we come into these meetings for presentations and yet we don't know what the presentation is.
Duly noted, Commissioner.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Going to the Commissioner from the 6th, Commissioner Son. Unmute yourself, sir. Commissioner Son, you're muted.
Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, for my colleague, I'd like to try to get some clarity around the stormwater issue there.
Yep.
Commissioner Gary, what was actually happening there now is not so much he's taking money from the balance of the stormwater income, is that by being an enterprise fund, there are certain fees it pays as a result of being an enterprise fund. It's payment in lieu of taxes. So it might have come to about $2 million with all of the fees that come with it as a result of being an enterprise fund. And a couple of things were payment in lieu of taxes. And there's another one, I can't think of the secondary one. And as a result of it, because normally that would just go back into the general fund anyway. And what the role was here was to leave it on the table so that it could fund more projects. Now, so that's what it is. Not so much taking from their balance as much as trying to, these were money they would normally pay back to the general fund anyway. So they're saying leave it in the project and not take it out. Now, the administrator and finance and putting it up there, what they're actually saying, hey, let's take that, let's not, the payment in lieu of taxes and everything that we was going to use it to help enhance the program. Let's leave it in there this year to try to balance the budget and institute it back in the next year to further advance the project. They probably can come back a little bit later, but I'm gonna move on. I just didn't want to think that every time I take your money out of that.
Well, finance has confirmed that this is 100% stormwater fees. So
it's stormwater money, but not the fees. See, you see right there, the bottom said payment in lieu of taxes. So she.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But
Commissioner
yeah.
Commissioner Simon, state your question. Yeah, state your question.
To the administrator and to the finance department, the top 10 departments that you had there, are their budget increasing in any form or fashion other than maybe cost of living adjustment that we might have put in the last part of the year? And so we know that's going to be carried over. Other than that, are any of these top 10 departments budget increasing?
No, sir, they are
No,
not.
sir.
The only adjustments that were made to the level of the 2021 budget going forward, to 2021, but let me get this right. The only adjustments that were made to the level of the 2020 budget going forward to 2021 are for the additional 6 months for the cost of living raise and for any new positions that were not budgeted for a full year in 2020. Because you did approve positions in 2020, but some of them did not come on board in January. So you will have an additional cost for a full year's funding for those positions. But those were the only 2 adjustments that were made to departmental budgets.
Okay. So will somebody define what you call strategic deductions? What does that mean?
The same thing. I called it surgical on this presentation. It's called strategic. It means simply to go and find specific areas or programs as opposed to across the board. It means figuring out what you don't want to budget for specifically.
Give me an example, a couple examples of what that looks like. What programs?
Okay, let's say that you had a program that operated an after-school program at a facility, and that after-school program cost $40,000 to run and was utilized by 15 individuals. There could be a recommendation, and that's just, there's not this specific one. This is just a general example that you looked at that particular program and decided that is a reduction that we can accomplish next year. We will not operate this program.
Okay, so my question is, okay, that was a scenario there, but can you be specific about what program? I mean, one thing that comes to mind there, well, I'm gonna leave what particular program alone, but tell me exactly when you said strategic reduction, what was a program, an actuarial program?
Administrator Sims?
Commissioner, we are looking through our budget and finding some programs that we know that with the pandemic still going on, some of the projects that we know that might not take place, and we will be carefully assessing, as well as we all know a budget is a working document that the projections can change, and we know that. So with the strategic reduction, some things we might reduce, say, knowing that the first quarter of 2021, we might not be able to have. And then if we see that those projects are taking place, we would do like any other entity, other government entity, we would, bring those projects back in place and fund those projects and amend the budget. The budget is a working document.
Okay, well, let me show you the concern I have with the answers I'm getting. And I don't make them right or wrong. I'm just saying what's concern me. Can you go back to that? Somebody just moved something. Can you go back to the slide we were at, please?
Okay.
When you got proposed solutions, you got $3 million here, and you says eliminate transfer to transit. Hard number, you know exactly what you're gonna do. So use of fund balance, that's $2 million. Hard number, you know exactly what you're gonna do. Reinstate the stormwater payment and taxes, $1.3 million. Hard number, you know what you're gonna do. But when I ask you about all about the strategic reductions, I'm getting scenarios as opposed to saying, okay, strategically looked at this. I'm just asking, what are those programs? Because are projects, because that could be problematic for us because we don't know what you're asking us to, and you're talking about the tune of $918,000, you know?
Commissioner, if I may also add, we asked all the departments to give us 2% reduction, and they had a deadline by today. We are still receiving, some departments are able to do it. Some departments are indicating it still will cause even the 2% a hardship with their operations. So we know some departments have already provided us 2%. We have calculated that in that the 918,000 with this approach. We know we are still getting numbers from various departments to come up with the $918,000.
Yeah, okay, well, that's fine. I mean, now that makes sense because you're telling me how you're trying to get to that point by giving a hypothetical. So you had to have something in mind directly and looking at some program. That's what I was asking. And then you're saying also this coming from where some of those departments are going to be able to do the 2% reduction. So I'm fine with that. The other thing I saw in that is the land trust. And it said, and you said that it was this was a contractual obligation, and it could be, but I'm asking from this particular reason. The land trust, I think just a year or so ago, last budget cycle, I believe, is around $45,000 or $50,000. I thought we just raised it. I didn't realize it was a contractual obligation. We raised it to $65,000. I remember that, but I didn't know it was a contract tied to that it becomes part of our annual budget.
So, Commissioner from the 6th, as the administrator has said, we have a series, as you see, of contractual obligations that we've entered into. They've been long-standing. This certainly doesn't mean
Go back to that slide. Can we go to that slide?
Yeah, slide 7. Slide 7. On slide 7, this does not mean that this is not an appropriate time for us to at least look at that as well. But these have been long-standing contractual obligations that the city of Augusta has entered into and has had. One of very important note is the one with DFACS. That's an ongoing conversation. Even as most recently, many of you are aware of the challenges of moving forward with the construction in that building off of Fenwick Street. So once again, I'm gonna applaud Administrator Sims and the team for at least coming back to us with this option 3 to think about where we can go. If we, as I said earlier, and I'm gonna relinquish back to you, Commissioner, because you may have one more question. But yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna relinquish back to you. Go ahead, sir. Okay.
One is a statement and one is a question. Well, I would encourage, when you get that information in from these department cuts and things, go ahead and get that out to us as commissions, and how you could determine to get to the $900,000 or it'd be $1 million, being 1.2, and give us advance so we can just kind of look at that as well in the thought process. That's my statement. My other question is, based on the last commission meeting that we had, we made mention that we was going to be contracting, so for at least for a year with for our ambulance service. And so I don't see where that was addressed at all here in the adjustments that you made in the presentation. Even though that may be the first of the year when we implement it, there's no mention of that in the presentation. Because we realize they're going to have some kind of financial obligations going to come with that, and that hasn't been mentioned.
At this point, Commissioner Sun, we do not know the financial impact from those actions from the previous meeting. We do have internally a follow-up meeting with staff, but at this point, we do not know any financial impact from those actions. So therefore,
I'm sorry, go
we
ahead.
did not include it in the presentation today.
Okay, all right. I just want to make mention because I hadn't heard any mention of it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Administrator Sim and the Finance Department.
All right, thank you. All right, so let me just kind of tee everybody up. We're going to go in this order. The commissioner from the 10th, the 4th, and then the 2nd. Before we do that, I believe we've got some information that's going to be presented to us going back to the question around sales tax collections. Tim?
Sales tax collections for July were $3 million, and for August of this year were $2.96 million. Compared to last year, July was 3.1, and August was 3.27 million. So it's still down from the prior year.
Okay. So what I'd like to, and this is a request for information going forward, and then I'm going to turn it over to the commissioner from the 10th. I'd like for us to see a bar chart that shows sales tax collections for each month, 2020 compared to 2019, so that we can have that information to share with the team. Okay?
Would you like that now, sir?
Absolutely, that'd be outstanding.
Mr. Mayor, let me get in line also.
All right, fantastic. I'll add you to after the commissioner from the 2nd. All right. As Tim is adding that, he's going to show it to us. Commissioner from the 10th, you're up there. You on deck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not to be the dead horse, but I also agree with Commissioner Garrett that, you know, we need this information ahead of time so we can look at it, digest it, and make decisions, not spur of the moment decisions. Now, with having said that, I would be absolutely categorically denial against any just going with a 5% or 3% or whatever across the board cut. I think we ought to take the approach of going by department, seeing where we can cut. And sometimes you're talking about surgical cuts. Sometimes a surgeon has to cut real deep in order to cure something. Maybe it's time that we take a good hard look at some departments that are not well. I mean, I'm sure that they've got their fan base that's going to go, no, they function really well, but they don't. And we can actually cut some departments. As hard as that seems, I think we need to address that. I'm looking at 3 departments that I've written down. So I think we need to look at that. And that's all I have to say at this. But
Commissioner from the 10th.
I want to say the same thing that I said last year. Just because all the numbers add up to a total at the bottom of the line, that doesn't mean that we have a balanced budget. It just means that we've got matching numbers. Thank you.
Commissioner from the 10th, do you want to share with us those 3 departments?
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, let me ask you that before we do that.
Hold on, he's still on the floor. And then I got to go down the list now. Hold on. Commissioner from 10th.
And I'm sure I'm going to catch hell about this, but keep Augusta beautiful, the compliance department, and the DDA.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Tim, are you going to put that on the screen or you're sending that to us? What are you doing?
Jeff, can I share?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes, go ahead.
You took it away.
This went away again.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There you go.
Okay.
Hey, sir.
And I'll send this to Ms. Bonner to send out too.
Please.
So this is the collection for the last 2 years, 19 and 20.
Okay, and blue represents 2020. So once again, I think this gives people a really good picture of where we're trending as a city. And while there are some suggestion that the situation is dire, I think this data from just a purely sales tax collections would tell you that that's not necessarily the case. When you look at April, this is at the point of shutdown, March 16th. March 16th through April, we were shut down, and then into May. And so I think a picture is worth 10,000 words, or in this case, I'm not sure what the realized deficit is. I've seen numbers loosely talked about 5 million, but this is a picture of how we get there incrementally towards that 5 million of where we are. And that's not the only input. That's just a single input. Sales tax is just a single input in terms of what the overall revenue mix looks like. All right, I'm going to go to the commissioner from the 4th. You have the floor, commissioner from the 4th.
Thank you.
Yep.
Y'all can take that slide down. One of the things I want to first address is our fund balance, or the rainy day fund, or whatever you want to call it, the reserve fund. The reserve fund is there for a reason. It is there when you have emergencies, or you have these, i.e. rainy days, and you need to make up for, you need to pay for stuff you don't, that you have to pay for, and that. So we have the, I strongly recommend we use the fund balance, but also look at other cuts. So secondly, for me, option 3 has some points in it that, like the strategic reductions, but you can simply take that part out and add it to something else to make up, in my view, a better option overall. And because with the stormwater fee thing, particularly the franchise fee, there's a question that goes more than whether it goes to the general fund or wherever go. And that question being about whether or not, we should be, it should be in that vein, because we already own that. So that's not we're not, somebody's not renting our own stuff or paying for using our own stuff. So that's a question one of the reasons why this was a excellent idea to do that with the stormwater program. So I'm totally against filling with the stormwater program. The other thing is, with all the budget cuts that we're talking about, knowing that we had a real tight issue coming up for 2021, but yet and still this commission still approved something that could add anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000 to our required need of revenue, i.e. this thing about the ambulance. My colleague asked about the financial impact. Well, the financial impact, in my view, is going to be drastic. So why would we do that? Add something to a budget that's already in the red, and we add approximately, when you look at the numbers of what generally they charge for that, we could be looking right at $400,000+ that we got to come up with that we already don't have. And I just think that's a self-inflicted wound. That's a disservice to the community and this commission to do that. So, and I'll reserve my additional questions and points for later on. Thank you, sir.
Well, all right, I'm going to the commissioner from the 2nd. Commissioner Dennis Williams. You're muted.
Yeah, I didn't have a question. Go right ahead.
All right, thank you. All right, Commissioner from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Administrator, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, may I ask an administrator question?
Sure.
When you say strategic surgical cuts, you're looking at anywhere from 5% down to 2% for different departments, correct?
No, sir. We're only asking the departments 2% because the 5% would drastically impact their service deliverables.
Okay. And I would ask you to look at and just look at it, and you can bring it back to us. Maybe 5% for certain departments. You look at folks like the utilities department. I know Mary Williams jokes with them or what have you, but I think they got a pretty big budget over there. Not ask you to answer that, but look at some departments that, well, maybe you could do 5, maybe you could do 2, maybe you could do 1%. Also, with the cuts, I think Commissioner Hassan alluded to it, so that you can stay out of hot water. When you get those departments where you want to do cuts, I would advise you to bring it back to us and let us kind of look at it and go over it, because what you're going to have is, folks going to call commissioners and say, well, they're cutting 2%, 3%, 4% from my department. And then you're going to be sitting in this same scenario trying to answer questions why you cut from different departments. So I think it would be wise for you to bring it back to us so that we can look over it, so we can give it our blessings, so that when people start calling the different commissioners, then look, we've already voted on it. Mr. Mayor, this is a question for you. I know that, Congress is going back and forth about the stimulus. And I think the stimulus would send some money down to the different states. So is there a possibility? Have you talked with anybody about a possibility of us getting any more money?
Commissioner, we have been in constant communications with our partners in DC. And while we hope and pray that there will be another stimulus, right now that's not on the table. At the earliest, that conversation would likely reconvene will be November the 9th. And as you have seen up to this point, it's been a complete catastrophe. But more importantly, let us be clear that we received dollars from the federal government by way of the state through our governor, and we only received phase 1 of that money to the tune of $10.3 million. There's an additional potentially $15 million that we in Richmond County never saw. And so absent the federal government, which is what National League of Cities, U.S. Conference of Mayors, NACO, and all of these other organizations have said, money needs to come directly to the cities in the same manner as community development block grant dollars are. Absent that happening, I do not believe that even with another stimulus plan or package, that those dollars will ultimately end up where they are needed the most, and that's in cities like ours all across the state of Georgia, all across America. So I want to be a hopeful optimist, but I'm doubtful.
Got you. This is a question, or more of a statement to the administrator. I looked at some different things in the budget. You may not want to cut it all out, or you may end up cutting it all out, or what have you, but we've got some things in there where we support some entities in our community, boxing club, Bethlehem Center, different things like that we may need to take a look at, and they need to understand that the city needs the money. We may need to borrow it from you this year. We give it back to you next year, or what have you. That was a statement. And my last thing, Mr. Mayor, is Tim still there?
Yes.
He is.
Hey, I was looking at your graph. What happened in April? What happened in April? I see a big red line, and then I saw a little small line. What happened? We didn't collect
No
anything.
Masters didn't happen.
It didn't have a master.
The Masters.
Was it that much? How much money do y'all think we lost?
900,000.
We tell y'all every year that the impact of the Masters is on sales tax is close to $1 million in April.
Wow. Okay.
April of 2019, we brought in 4.2 million. April of 2020, 2.7.
Wow. Okay. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner from the 5th, while you still are here and you yielded the well, I want to go back to slide 4 from the presentation. In our previous meeting, you asked the administrator and the team to look at 5% across the board reductions. And on slide 4, what the administrator said is, here's what a 5% across the board reduction looks like. I want to remind all of us that we are in a growing, thriving city. For the last several years, our economy has been one of the fastest growing in the state of Georgia per the state's economist. COVID, yes, it's unprecedented, it's difficult, it's different, but what we cannot do, what we should want to do is put ourselves in a position of where we, as a government, put in measures around austerity cuts that further slow down our return to a very robust economy. Cuts have the systematic way of doing that. And I want to caution us when we look broadly at taking that approach, even if we use the term surgical in nature, at the end of the day, what happens is we worsen debt and we slow economic growth. That's what we don't want to see happen. As we turn the corner going into 2021, we want to give our community an opportunity to rebound significantly and to thrive. And one of the ways to do that is take a very measured approach. We don't have the luxury of doing what the governor did, and that's taking $1.5 billion and sticking it in the unemployment insurance fund to pay that. What we've got to do, and the perfect example of that is the conversation that we've had around the small business relief program. To date, we've only given out $335,000 in grants to small businesses that when we started discussing that in April of this year, quite frankly, in March of this year, businesses are hurting. So we don't want to do anything additional that would further slow down our economic growth opportunities. But I do want to make sure that we pivot and bring you back to the place that you requested, sir. And I think the administrator's done that, of showing you, here's what the impact. At a city that's 203,000 residents and expected to grow just because of Fort Gordon over the next several years through 2023, we talk about an additional 15 to 20,000 people moving into the region. Service delivery will be impacted. Our ability to deliver services right now in unprecedented fashion. You've got development, single family development going on Brown Road and Highway 56 that's never happened before. So our need to get utilities out there, our need for engineering services will not be at this place it's ever been before. District 4, the same thing's happening. And so if we take the approach of cutting now, we impair our city's ability to meet the needs of economic growth and development. So I just want to caution us on that. All right.
Mayor, I don't know whether you can see me or not, but I mean,
I see you.
I've been trying
I
to
got
get
you.
in
Yeah, I got your hand. All right. Commissioner from the 9th.
Yes, sir. This conversation you're having now, we should have been had. We talked about the small businesses, like you said, relief program back in March when this epidemic first got started. But this, not just the masters, but the other thing that we should have been talking about economic dollars. Now, there's been some side conversation about what we're going to do economically. We're not doing anything, in my opinion, besides building homes and that type of thing for the economic dollars to come in our city. But we get to the budget time, we're always at the crunch. We always want to cut. I'm not in favor of doing it with the stormwater fee, which was set up for the stormwater. That's what the money ought to be used for. But as an elected body, we have not had one conversation that I've been in about economic dollars and how we can improve economic money for this city. but we want to have all of the conveniences that other cities got. We're not doing anything. Now, if there's something that somebody else discussed, I'd just like to hear about it now. I'm out, but I'd like to hear about it because I hadn't heard one conversation. And to not know how much money the Augusta National brings in every year, what the impact it really makes on this whole entire city, and not just our city, but Aiken, alike or around, probably even as far as Atlanta. So, but we're not doing those things, and we're at budget time now. We'll be budgeting to do things that make more economic dollars to come in our city, so we have money to do things with. I hear you, Mr. Mayor. It's almost too late. That's like closing the gate when the horse got out. It's too late now. He's out there. So we need to go from this point this year to doing some things that's going to be serious enough, whether it be cuts or whether going into general funds or where we got to go to get money to do things with that's going to bring money in. It takes money to make money. That's it.
All right. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I'm running after that horse trying to catch it.
Yeah, we should have these conversations. We've been talking around stuff. We had one serious, not even serious conversation about economic dollars. We talk about what cyber did, what they did downtown. We ain't did one thing. I certainly appreciate what the Augusta National do for Augusta. A lot of people don't understand that. But if we were doing something else too, along with that, then look how much money we could have generated. You got lemons, make lemonade with it.
Yeah, I think to your point, Commissioner, there are several conversations that need to happen. So I'm gonna pivot back to Administrator Sims. I think there are a series of data requests that are out here that will help us in our next work session. I think that's important. Administrator Sims, can we be prepared to have another conversation on, as we look at a date certain, can we be prepared to have another work session, perhaps maybe Friday morning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if we can do that at 11 o'clock. That will give you and your team sufficient enough time to pull together this additional data request that you've had, and make our conversation again even as robust and fruitful as this one right here. Friday, 11 o'clock. In addition to that, and I'll follow this up, our team will follow this up with an email, but I think it's prudent for us to look at overtime. And I'd like to see a comparative chart as you have here with your top 10 departments. I'd like to see a top 10 departments chart of overtime for 2019, 2020. I think that will be helpful. That will help discern what's going on in some of these broader discussions, to include the conversation around ambulance. That will be helpful so that people have a real picture of what that looks like. I think it also would be helpful for us to have a conversation about what the revenue implications are, as the commissioner from the 4th raised about ambulance service. The commissioner from the 6th raised the question about strategic reductions. I think that's your 2% number, and being able to flesh that out. So giving you time to be able to provide that information. We have our Recreation and Parks Director, Interim Deputy Director Maurice McDowell, one of the things that this city has never looked at is how we could bolster our recreation and parks offerings that truly are able to be monetized going forward around economic growth and development. We, as much as it pains me to say this, effectively all of our recs and parks activities are free outside of renting facilities. And if we're going to be a vibrant community moving forward, we've got to look at how we take this, time, this snapshot in time, to look for ways to bolster that going into 2021. We tend to rely heavily on outside events, whether that's Ironman, the Masters, Arts in the Hearts, events that we support, that we help lift. But in terms of us as a city, we've never taken, as the commissioner from the 9th would say and tell you, in his time and tenure here, we've never really focused around how do we harness recs and parks, and we deliver on events. You've got the Sonny Cup tennis tournament that happens. We were fortunate 2 years ago to have the largest Army softball tournament east of the Mississippi, and that went away. We've got to look at ways that, as the commissioner from the 9th would consistently tell us, and I'm confident that our Recs and Parks director is going to bring these things to the table that help us get to that point, that turn into economic growth opportunities. So if you can bring that data back, the question that has been raised by the commissioner from the 8th around stormwater, those things, and if we could have that data dump by Thursday in advance of Friday's meeting by noon Thursday, that would at least give us all an opportunity to look at the charts, to look at the underlying data, and be able to come into Friday's meeting with some real thoughts.
Mr. Mayor.
All right, Commissioner from the 5th, then the 4th.
Well, and that's why, when I think of the SPLOST and what have you, when we think about things that we can do, we need to build money makers. We talk about a water park. It's not just for fun. After a while, it will pay for itself, and then we'll reap the benefits. We'll have an entity that will bring big money into the government. So we need to think in that manner. And I thank you for letting me talk.
In regards to the equip system, I'm trying to go through the system, and it's asking for.
Hold on a minute. I'm not sure who that is. Okay. All right. Hold on there, buddy. Okay. All right, Commissioner from the 5th. All right, were you done, sir?
Yeah, I'm done. I just wanted to throw in that little thing about the water park.
Okay.
We also talked about the blight ordinance for those entities that won't keep the properties up, that, we would charge them extra taxes, which would bring more money in. So there are ways we can do that. Exactly what you're saying, ways we can bring money into the government.
Thank you. Commissioner from the 4th.
Thank you. Just my final couple of comments here this morning, afternoon at this point is number one, when we look at a lot of the departments, we again have to remember when we ask these folks to make these cuts, and we're talking about across the board, or rather in that vein, many of these departments, their money doesn't necessarily come from the general fund. So they are only able to cut what they receive from the general fund. So you may say they have a mega millions budget, but all of that is not from the general fund. So we just have to be mindful of that when you talk about these cuts. Again, the general fund primarily services salaries. And so when you do that, then you can expect a lot of headache, a lot of folks going home, folks having to be furloughed, this kind of thing. And I don't think we really are at that point. Secondly, is when we talk about our elected officials, again, we're not, we may want to cut some of their budget, but that is going to be a real dog fight to do that. So we talking about the clerk of Superior Court. That's a constitutional officer. And you're going to find it real difficult to ask these folks budget. Not saying you can't, but you're going to find that very difficult to do that. So I again want to say we don't have to raid our rainy fund, but that's what the purpose of it being there is, not to do all these, to pay. That's why we put money aside. So we said we don't want to use it. Why did we put it there? So I'm saying is you want to make that as minimum as possible. And since I've been on this commission, we've never reached into the fund balance or the reserve fund or the rainy day fund to balance the budget. But this is the first time we dealt with COVID as well. Now we've had to make some payments out of the reserve fund during the hurricane, after the hurricane. But then we, through good hard work of the staff and the commission and everybody else involved, we got that paid back up. So compliments to the staff for the work they've done. And I think we as commissioners need to look at when we make that job even more difficult by requiring additional money in a time when we are extremely short. Thank you.
Commissioner from the 4th, I'm gonna buy you lunch. That was outstanding. I couldn't have said it any better. You know, from this time, when you look at having to pay back the reserve fund post-hurricane, this has been a yeoman's effort from this body and staff. So I think we've done ourselves well in that, and we balance the budget every year on time. So I do applaud that effort. All right, I'm going to the commissioner from the 6th.
No, I'm fine, Mr. Mayor. I had nothing to say. I'm fine.
Okay. All right, commissioner from the 8th.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm not sure if this has been mentioned or if we got confirmation. Will the presentation from today be sent to us today? So we can also have that in preparation for Friday's meeting?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
All right. All right. If there be no further questions, Administrator Sims, finance team, thank you all. This has been an encouraging conversation with the questions that have been posed. And I look forward to us digging our heels in and really getting after this with a focus around a sustainable community that we continue to put in a position to grow and to thrive. Administrator Sims, thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. This work session is adjourned.